Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this is the Bible Reloaded, and this is an important day for us because things have come full circle. If you don't remember, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we started doing the movie reviews, which have quickly become our most popular series of videos.
I think we might be good at it.
And that journey began with a little movie known simply as God's Not Dead.
Do you guys remember God's Not Dead?
Yeah.
Do you guys remember how it made you feel on the inside? The magic is back, people!
Yes, today we're gonna talk about Pureflix's God's Not Dead 2. No subtitle, no The Next Generation, no Resurgence, no...
Duh.
It's just, it is what it is. It lays it out there, and no Josh, unfortunately. No Kevin Sorbo, because he's dead, but we do have some returning favorite characters, like this guy whose name I don't remember.
Also, that lady who was like, she wasn't a B plot, she was like a D plot. I don't know. But anyways, let's do the review, Hugo!
This movie, with pausing and taking notes, took me 4.5 hours to watch.
Same.
Okay, so right off the bat, we get our studio logos, as always, and there it is. The shining beacon on a hill we've been waiting for. Thank you, Pureflix, for this gift. It shan't be squandered.
The film opens up with some aerial footage of Anytown, America, with some hip Christian music over the top. But you already knew that.
I like the helicopter shots. Someone saved some serious money by switching out Hercules with Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
So Melissa Joan Hart will be the protagonist of the story, as many of you know from the trailers, but what most of you didn't know is that to prepare for this role, much like Heath Ledger did for his role as the Joker, she kept a diary with her that said things like, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," and then an illustration of her stoning herself to death. MJH, this is your masterwork.
Wait a second, guys. We're 1 minute and 30 seconds into the movie. We are obligated to show a symbol of Americana taking part in some sort of Christian activity. Oh, there you go. There it is.
And at just under 2 minutes in, we get our first shot of everyone's favorite Asian foreign exchange student, And the dude is nipping hard. Don't be embarrassed, Asian foreign exchange student. The Bible turns me on, too. And here's a shot of David A.R. White stubbing the fuck out of his toe, without sound, because the Christian boy band won't shut their whore mouths for long enough to let David attempt and fail at physical comedy without us running the risk of a DMCA violation. God damn you, the band Audio Adrenaline featuring His Little Feet International Children's Choir. That was actually on the track list. Was that real song?
This is a theme that runs through the whole opening credits montage. So you get your standard opening credits, set to generic pop song, as Jake said, but after the toe stub, he also gets coffee spilled on him, and then he spills his own coffee. This movie might not be so bad after all, guys.
But right now, I want you guys to remain calm. Okay, this is a family show. Seriously, please refrain from masturbation, because you're about to see the sexiest goddamn scene in the whole film. Pat Boone lying in bed. Just look at his Pat Booniness. So wrinkly, yet stern. Silk pajamas. I bet the thread count of that bed is at least 650, 700. Pat Boone, a man of class and sensuality.
We open on a high school junior whose parents are lecturing her on needing to work harder since it's her junior year of high school now. I don't really care about that, though, but her mom happens to be played by Maria Canals Barrera, whom you may recognize as the mother from the Disney Channel original series, The Wizards of Waverly Place. Not sure if that's a lateral move or a negative one. Anyway, why am I bringing this up? You know how IMDb ranks actors in the movie by how popular their pages are? Well, she's first billed in this movie. Yeah. Strap in, kids. She's the most famous actress in this thing. Sorry, Melissa Joan Hart, you don't need Clarissa to explain that one.
Ouch.
Sick.
90s burn. We got a 90s burn, people! And so here we have some bitch. I don't know her name yet, so she will be known as some bitch for the time being. Anyway, some bitch is angry at her parents for not giving her a ride to school? And possibly her brother moved out or something, or he's dead. I'm not sure. She's probably just on the rag.
So some bitch starts walking to school with her friend Marlene, who has trouble saying the word tacos for some reason.
long as they can talk us tonight. Talk us.
Morning, Grace. I keep telling you, you don't have to keep doing this.
Melissa Joan Hart's character's name is Grace. Do you get it? 5 minutes in, but we're worried that you didn't fucking get it!
You're a good girl.
Oh, God. I'm surprised MJH isn't soaking wet with lines like that being thrown at her from Silky PJ to Pat Boone. Every word he says is just dripping with sex.
You might want to start thinking about some other guy you want to have breakfast with.
And there's the master, at it again, letting her down easy. Pat Boone preferred the witch outfit, sweetheart. He has needs. Well, hello. Sign me up for chocolatier class because Daddy's got himself a craving. Yeah, she's the principal. So Grace here is a teacher at the Hot Chocolate Lady's school. Inside, she sits in the teacher's lounge with some other teachers when one mentions how excited she is for retirement.
Oh, you're gonna miss the kids when you're gone, Rizzo.
No, Grace, that's sweet, but no, I won't.
So MJH takes it upon herself to say,
Well, I happen to think that difficult students can be a blessing.
I'm 100% sure that the writer of the film never taught, because while it is a very rewarding experience, and I personally loved it, some kids are just tiny snot-faced cunts.
Now we get to the real stars of the movie, the biracial pastoral bromance. They knew too because they do a long camera pan.
Holy shit, the biracial pastoral bromance is back in action, motherfuckers! So apparently Brooke, formerly known as Some Bitch, is having a bad day, but Grace is here to help because she's our intrepid secondary educator with a heart of gold and an iron will. Actually, she does basically nothing of note here. I just wanted to use the word intrepid. So Brooke ends up stalking MJH and corners her in a coffee shop after school, explaining that she lied about not being upset and that her brother died or something. It's all very vague. Maybe he was gay and they disowned him, and it's more of a spiritual death rather than a real, oops, I ran a red light and got murdered by a car death.
In order to help her out, Melissa immediately goes to asking if the brother believed in heaven and says that she takes everything in stride because of Jesus. I knew this film would be nuanced in its message, but it's too subtle so far. I hope they explain where they're going with this, or I am just lost.
Yeah, and when Grace asks Brooke if her brother believed in God or whatever, Brooke says she's not sure, meaning her family isn't very religious, meaning that Jesus loves her brother, but not enough to rescue him from a fiery eternity in the painful and torturous prison cell called hell that he created for people that don't respect him enough because Jesus is a cool guy like that. I'm similar to Jesus in that way, by the way. If you don't subscribe to my channel, I'll murder your fucking pets. Love you.
Jesus.
No. 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 No! No! No!
We revisit Amy from the last film. Remember, she was the reporter atheist who met the Duck Dynasty people and was dating Dean Cain. In the last film, she contracted cancer and became Christian with the help of the Newsboys. In this film, she calls the Newsboys and tells them the cancer is gone. And the Newsboys aren't even shocked. They just say, yeah, this is what you prayed for, isn't it? God must have great plans for you. Okay, even if you're a Christian, can you not see how that's a fucked up thing to imply about people who do die of cancer? If you can't, you're officially the human version of this guy's hair, confused and utterly devoid of basic introspection.
My cancer's... it's gone.
Jesus fucking Christ. This person is considered an actress. I'm revoking her of this title, and she shall be henceforth known as a speaktress, because she just kinda speaks her lines.
That's the thing about atheism. It doesn't take away the pain. It just takes away the hope.
You know, Pat Boone really gets it, man. He really understands us. For instance, I'm forced to watch this movie, and he's right. I have no hope left. 11 minutes in, and I'm already an emotionless husk of a person.
So once Pat Boone gets done saying what you think is the dumbest thing he could possibly say to his seed's seed, he says this.
People seem to forget that the most basic human right of all is the right to know Jesus.
What? Freedom of speech, expression, and belief are of course paramount in human rights, but not specifically the right to know Jesus. People also have the right to believe in Allah, Vishnu, Xenu, or Gary the Flying Monkey. just as much as Jesus, or nothing for that matter. You're losing it, Boone!
Meanwhile, I'm lost in the sexy way he does that old guy glasses thing where they as if by sheer will, stay steady on the tip of his nose. And as I snap back to reality, I realize that sexy as Pat may be, he's kind of an idiot. I found the Universal Declaration of Human Rights drafted by the United Nations in 1948, and as it happens, it makes no mention of Jesus. I control F to that shit. Actually, the first article reads, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. So suck a dick, Pat Boone. Preferably mine. Meanwhile, at Brooke's house, the Salvation Army comes by to pick up whatever remains of her dead brother's belongings. The film is beginning to frame it as if her parents are atheists, and due to this, they don't give a fuck about their dead kid. And they won't ever address this, by the way. Meanwhile, in churches around the globe, billions of people celebrate the torture and murder of some Jewish guy.
Okay, now, I don't know if this is a paid product placement for the Salvation Army or just a shout out to the organization, but do they really want themselves associated with one of the most tragic moments of this character's life? Call Salvation Army for all your symbolic letting go needs. We'll somberly remove your loved one's memories as you sit in their bed and realize what you can never get back from the iron grip of time and death. You do get a tax deduction though, so that's nice.
And one of those Salvation Army people actually find an annotated Bible within the belongings of her dead brother's shit, and she promptly turns past all the Jew murder, rape, incest, and concubine slaughter, and into Colossians, which, if you don't know, is basically a blowjob to Jesus in text form. Good job, movie.
I'm impressed it only took 15 minutes, and we already have the seeds of our first conversion. Josh would be proud. The next day in Sabrina's class, she's teaching about passive resistance. By the way, sorry about all the Sabrina and Clarissa jokes. Her IMDb bench is not very deep. Anyway, Brooke decides to ask this.
Isn't that sort of like what Jesus meant when he said that we should love our enemies?
Before we even get to the movie's conflict, and let's be real, you can already see where this is going. It isn't necessarily unconstitutional for a teacher to talk about religious figures in the correct context. You can answer a question like this as long as it's framed that Jesus is a figure in a religious text or important literary figure in Western philosophy and history. As long as you stay impartial, it's fine. So, how does whatever the character's name and drive me crazy answer?
The writer of the Gospel of Matthew records Jesus as saying, "You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you."
And this marks the part of the movie where Christians get to masturbate to the thought of persecution. It's really a glorious example of the lack of awareness the writers of this film have in regards to the religious climate in America specifically. And furthermore, what the character of Grace says in the film is by no means a violation on her part. She is asked a question that ties perfectly into the talk she's giving about peaceful protest and parlays it into a talk about Dr. King, who was a reverend, without making her point of view be known or pushed onto the students in any way. This is legal. This movie went from fun, will Pat Boone get naked story and just turned into propaganda. Still though, I think Pat Boone might get naked.
Oh look, it's the Chinese exchange student from the first movie, and he's friends with David A.R. White now. Okay. Melissa Joan Hart gets called in to talk with the administration about her comments on Jesus. They are evil secular administrators who want to stop the spread of Jesus.
And so, yeah, the school administration is on her ass asking things like, do you think your answer falls under district, state, and federal guidelines? Yes, movie. It does. Here's the joint statement of current law on religion in the public schools of the United States of America, and I quote, "The history of religion, comparative religion, the Bible, and other scripture, as literature, either as a separate course or within an existing course, are all permissible public school subjects." It goes on to say that it's important to talk about religions, especially in a historical context. This statement, by the way, is based on Supreme Court decisions and precedent. So basically, American Christians, you and your beliefs within the public school systems are not being persecuted. They're being taught with objectivity and without bias. The way the teacher in this film responded to the question would in no way be a violation to this, and frankly, you guys have totally turned me off. I was like rock hard during that Pat Boone stuff, and you've gone and softened me.
The school also bans Brooke from talking to the teacher because secularists are evil.
Never mind. Hard as a rock again.
This is Melissa's union lawyer, Tom. One of her first questions to him is if he's Christian. This movie isn't doing a very good job of making me think she's impartial.
We're shot from the sexy Metcalf scene and into the biracial pastoral bromance, talking about Jesus things that I know you don't really care about, so we're just going to focus on how much they obviously want to fuck each other.
Yes. And where were you 4 hours ago?
If those aren't fuck me eyes, then I don't know what those eyes are saying. Although, that would explain why I'm not allowed within 100 yards of a school.
And in case you were afraid we would go 10 minutes without seeing a Bible, don't worry, we have a scene with Melissa reading and praying immediately after that.
Just one time I'd like to see one of these biblical inspiration scenes to be read from the Old Testament instead of the New, and then the following scene would be her murdering a bunch of firstborn Egyptians and cutting some sacrificial goat necks. Love you, Jesus!
At an actual hearing the next day, she's offered that they let it go if she just apologizes and recognizes her comments were potentially inappropriate. She immediately declines against her lawyer's wishes. Believe it or not, this is where the movie loses me. I mean, it's a bad movie so far, but this is where I started disliking the protagonist. Instead of admitting potential fault and considering maybe she crossed a line in a secular government institution, she stands her ground and demands they say that she was in the right. Now here's the difference between this movie and the previous movie. I miss Josh from the first movie. Do you know why? Josh is like 19 years old. I get why being a young person just going to college and having your beliefs challenged would give you the fervor to get up in front of people and say, no, let me show you my opinion. Melissa Joan Hart is at best mid-40s. This bitch should know better.
And I think she chooses this because Melissa Joan Hart went to witch school, not lawyer school.
I would rather stand with God and be judged by the world than stand with the world and be judged by God.
And this is the story of how Melissa Joan Hart began her role as Sabrina, the middle-aged prison bitch. I've seen Orange is the New Black. I know how this shit works. So you guys know how just a little bit ago I went on a rant about the constitutionality of things and stuff like that? Well, that was from the ACLU.
How do we make this go away and not get blood on our hands? That's the easy part. We let the ACLU do it.
God damn it, you guys couldn't Google this shit for a fucking movie? It's on their goddamn website. Am I the last sane person on planet Earth? I wish I was dead. So Satan pulls up to Brooke's house in his modest sedan and talks to the parents about the coming court case. Luckily, he's a professional and as such stays objective and subtle about his personal beliefs.
We're going to prove once and for all that God is dead.
I'm glad this guy is here to bring a modicum of respectability to this shit show.
This character makes Professor Radisson look like Kevin Sorbo in real life. Melissa Joan Hart and Sex in Human Form sit down and he explains that she is getting sued for pretty much everything she has because...
To them, your beliefs are like a disease whose time has come and gone. Sort of like smallpox or polio.
Hey idiots, did you notice no one was suing her for her beliefs before she preached part of the Gospels to her public school classroom? As a lawyer, it might be your job to find out if there's a connection.
I'm sorry, Hugo, but the pool boy here is obviously no constitutional lawyer, because if he were, he'd realize that this is like taking a literal shit on the First Amendment, then posting it on Twitter along with a dick pic. We only wanted the dick, Jesse Metcalf. Get your life together, man.
We have another biracial pastoral bromance scene. Nothing happens, just I think they're cute together.
And the next day, MJH and the human being that I wish was my own personal fleshlight show up to select jurors for the trial. When they sit down, Satan looks at Jesse Metcalf the same way everyone else does. Like he's edible.
So the jury selection process begins and we meet this case's judge.
Ernie, no! Ernie! Ernest Lee Hudson, no! At
the risk of making an overly used reference...
If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say.
So they go through a boring jury selection montage. If you don't know, in court they pick jurors on the basis of trying to eliminate bias. They finally get to the last juror, and what do you know? It's David A.R. White. What are the odds? Well, I guess pretty high since he's a producer of this movie and wants to finally beat Melissa Joan Hart in having the lowest average Rotten Tomatoes score. Back with Amy, we find out that since her remission, she's losing faith and decides the only reason she really became Christian was because she thought she was going to die. Leave it to Pureflix to do an atheist conversion story on the same character twice.
And she basically says that when she was sick, she, quote, was willing to hold on to anything. But now that she's in remission, she's not sure if that belief was valid because it was caused due to her brush with mortality. I can't believe I'm saying this, but for a single, sparkling moment, God's Not Dead 2 has a moment of clarity and honesty. I'm sure this will be ruined by a newsboy soon, but for now, we can rejoice. As we move closer to trial, Satan and all the eroticism and desire of humankind boiled into a single person confront each other. Satan basically says, hey, you probably weren't going to win this. I looked up your file, and I'm pretty surprised you took this case. Sex Metcalf replies that he just doesn't want to see the innocent people get in trouble for shit they shouldn't, and naturally, Satan replies,
You know what hate is, Tom? I hate what people like your clients stand for.
Because Satan is a reasonable and soft-spoken dude, a real master of subtlety.
The first day of the trial begins, an evil atheist lawyer makes an opening statement saying that Christianity isn't on trial, nor is faith. It's simply a case of separation of church and state. And yeah, he's right. He even compares the situation to a Muslim teacher doing the same thing Melissa did. I have a hard time believing that the Pureflix audience would enjoy a courtroom drama defending a Muslim teacher under the same circumstances. The movie several times goes out of its way to show the atheist lawyer is a scumbag with a vendetta against religion. But you know what? Who cares? He may be a huge asshole, but that has no bearing on the legality of what the teacher did. He's a lawyer regardless of his own bias. He still needs to make his case within the boundaries of the law, so his bias is irrelevant, as long as he doesn't do anything against courtroom procedure. Look at another courtroom drama, for instance, To Kill a Mockingbird. If Atticus Finch was a racist asshole, but made the same arguments he made in defense of Tom, he would still be a good lawyer. The entire reason and intent of the judicial branch is to try and use the law to eliminate bias and come to the truth. If your lawyer being a cunt made them ineligible from practicing law, there would be approximately 95% fewer lawyers in the world.
The first salvo of this trial really is the idea that she was preaching in class because her recall of a particular verse of the Bible was quick enough to imply that not only is she a Christian, but that she views Christianity as a superior religion. In reality, I know a ton of Christians who think their religion is garbage and that Islam or Judaism or something is superior. I can't even finish the goddamn joke, movie, you ignorant slut!
Amy is out doing something, I guess, when she gets a video message of Brooke being chastised for protesting outside of the school. She gets this from her niece, who happens to be weird taco girl. You know what, normally this would piss me off, but we have an hour and 20 minutes left of this garbage screenplay brought to life. I can't even care anymore. Melissa's lawyer, / the inspiration for half of my erections yesterday's, opening statement opens with him holding up the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and saying the phrase, separation of church and state, do not appear anywhere in them. This is the point where I realized we were watching a courtroom drama written by someone who knows nothing about constitutional law. When you take classes in constitutional law, there's a reason you don't just get a copy of the Constitution to read over. We in America live in a common law system of government. Now, what that means is that over time, precedents are set by higher courts that shape the law of the land over time. This is why the Supreme Court is so important, because when they make a decision on whether or not something is constitutional, they are de facto putting into law new constitutional rules that apply to specific circumstances of the case. For instance, the Constitution doesn't say you have the right to marry the same sex, but now that Obergefell v. Hodges happened, it is de facto considered a constitutional right. Same with Roe v. Wade and abortions, or if you just want something more pertinent to this case, McCollum v. Board of Education District 71, it was decided that religious teachings in public schools does indeed violate the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. In fact, there are many such rulings by the Supreme Court in relation to schools specifically. I'll link to those in the description if you're interested. Anyway, long story short, Tom is a moron who doesn't understand the basic premise of our common law legal system.
The sexiest man in the known universe continues to rebut by saying that her lesson plan did not include mentions of Jesus, and that the reason she brought the subject up in the first place was because she was answering a direct question about Jesus. Now, these are all good points, but have you guys considered this? If you don't see Jesus in that ass, I can't help you. Checkmate, atheists. So some witnesses are called to the stand, and Satan questions this lady in her early 50s, southern drawl and floral-patterned blouse, says this.
I don't think she'd chew a stick of gum without praying first. It makes everyone feel awkward.
Wow, the writers did such an incredible job. They made this movie so believable, Hugo. I feel like this is real life.
Now it's the school principal's turn at the stand, and Tom asks the name of the school. It's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. High School. He asks why they don't call it Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. High School. For one, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is just the standard way he's addressed. Even his Wikipedia page is labeled as such. Secondly, this person knows nothing about Dr. Martin Luther King. His doctorate is in systematic theology. The doctor already implies his faith if you know what you're talking about. It also comes out that Melissa had asked staff members to go to church with her and takes donations for a faith-based charity in her classroom. Yeah, it's not looking great for her.
For some reason, we visit the biracial pastoral bromance while they're on a lunch date, and the guy from the car rental place in the first movie is now a waiter. That's a pretty lateral career move, I guess. I have no idea why they couldn't have just written another character and instead had to make this guy's life a depressing reminder of the struggles of the lower class. He's white, though. It'll be fine. Being white is the best.
Don't be so hasty, Jake. In the first movie, he mentioned he wanted to be an actor, and now he's doing dinner theater. Also, this guy was just the best part of God's Not Dead twice in a row. When's he getting a spin-off? At a sit-down lunch with the others from their church, the biracial pastoral bromance finds out that their church's sermons are being federally subpoenaed for review. They explicitly compare this to an incident in Houston and say that this is just the beginning of the federal government censoring what can and can't be taught in their own churches. Now, I looked into the Houston incident, and here's what happened. So the city of Houston passed an ordinance called the HERO, or Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, that basically said no business could discriminate based on gender, race, sex, religion, or sexual orientation. Now, remember, this only applied to businesses, city employment, and city contractors. Churches were exempt. However, a large base of, you guessed it, religious groups and churches were against this anti-discrimination bill. They gathered 15,000 signatures to try and get the repeal of HERO on the next election's ballot. The city, however, said they needed about 17,000 for it to even be considered. This caused a group that organized the petition to sue the city of Houston. Now, here comes the subpoena part. The city had churches involved with a petition subpoenaed for their sermons because they believed the churches were coercing their congregations into signing, which, if you know about tax exemption status for churches in relation to political action, is a big no-no. So, this wasn't a case of the government just snooping, it was part of the discovery phase of an ongoing lawsuit pursuant to the possible illegal actions of specific churches that may have behaved inappropriately in gaining political support. So no, David A.R. White, the federal government doesn't give a shit about what your church preaches.
And it's important to note that this really did happen in real life, okay? And it had to do with the mayor-elect Anise Parker, who was one of the country's first openly gay mayors, with Houston being the most populous city to have that ever occur. I think it's up to the third biggest city in the country now. After her election, the city, like Hugo said, issued the subpoenas demanding that a group of pastors turn over any sermons, but specifically dealing with homosexuality, gender identity, or Anise Parker. And if they didn't turn them over, that they would be held in contempt of court. Now, on the surface, it looked authoritarian, but it's important to realize that to maintain their tax-exempt status, which he brought up, churches are not allowed to overtly mix political agendas into their service. It's also important to note that these pastors were at the front of an opposition to oppose her candidacy that proposed an ordinance submitted with 50,000 signatures. She would later end up withdrawing all the subpoenas, though, under social pressure. So anyways, we get a new scene where apparently Pat Boone's character doesn't want to be in the same room as Sexy McHardabs, and I'm glad he didn't, frankly. I'm not sure my balls have enough semen in them to deal with that on-screen orgasm.
Chinese exchange student father comes and disowns him for believing in Jesus is a dishonor to the family. Not quite as racist as the Muslim dad beating his daughter in the first one, but I'll take it.
And during this stereotypical disapproving and overbearing Asian father, he slaps him while finishing the conversation with the disownment. And while this did not lead to a karate fight, there was the slap. And from all appearances, the man has perfect form. He doesn't telegraph it too much. He lands it squarely on the disappointment's cheek. This guy definitely has a dojo somewhere.
Don't be so fucking racist, Jake. The Chinese don't all know karate. Kung Fu is the Chinese one.
In his depression, the disappointing Asian foreign exchange student with father issues starts playing a hymn or something he found in the church. This is fucking pathetic. No wonder his dad slapped his face.
By the way, the song he's playing is Near My God to Thee, which is the song that supposedly the band played as the Titanic sank, which is actually pretty appropriate, because this movie is not on an upward trajectory. Melissa and Sex Abs McFuckMyFace are sitting around trying to form a better case when this exchange happens.
Why did you feel compelled to bring Jesus up in history class?
Why shouldn't I have?
It's times like this that I regret not using a camera for this show. What am I supposed to say to that? All it deserves is a disappointed look at the camera, as if to say, really, movie? Really?
Back at Grace's house, she and all the fantasies of teenage girls poured into a mold of Jesse Metcalfe and granted sentience discuss their new plan of attack, which is that she wasn't preaching, but rather she was discussing the writings of the man, Jesus, as a historical figure, and in an AP history class, no less. Now, while the historicity of Jesus can be and is scrutinized, that's a goddamn brilliant plan. But also, as I mentioned before, it's entirely fucking unnecessary. This movie has a bigger victim complex than Donald Trump's baby hands. Don't worry, Hillary joke incoming to balance the scales. Back with the sad Asian guy, I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to change how I address him to late Asian guy, am I right? They're gonna soak so hard.
So yeah, Brooke wanders into the church with the exchange student, and he gets her to become a Christian, by the way. In case you wondered why he was in this one. That's it.
Aw, god damn it. The movie decided to invite real-life Christian apologetics author Lee fucking Strobel to the witness stand. Apparently, I don't know how reality works, because I was sure this case had nothing to do with shameless self-promotion.
If you don't know who Lee Strobel is, he's a real-life apologist who wrote The Case for Christ, among many other books on the subject of Christianity. I happen to have a copy of The Case for Christ on my bookshelf, and, it's bad. It's really bad. Maybe we'll do parts on here someday, like Atheists Read or something.
No one does that.
No, it's fine. Anyway, he says the court already affirmed Jesus because they swore in a Bible and because our calendar is separated between BC and AD, which isn't even accurate anymore because now they use Common Era before Common Era, but I assume he doesn't know that. This is pretty much the caliber of argument from his books as well, as if you're wondering. It's bad. I mean, you can read it if you want, but like, the new Harry Potter just came out, so I'd recommend that.
Don't worry, Hugo. I will destroy Lee Strobel. Let us begin. So first he makes a claim that Jesus is real because we use AD and BC like Hugo mentioned. He goes on to say that it's an amazing feat that the whole world uses this metric, yet he forgets that China exists and that the Gregorian calendar, put forward by Pope Gregory XIII, the calendar in which he is describing that we currently use, was introduced in 1582, when the world's population was roughly 540 million and the literacy rate was about 18% in Italy, where the Pope fucking lives. Then he goes on to talk about the sources he has for the historicity of Jesus, but he doesn't really list any examples, so I can't refute that. But I will assume that one of his main ones is Josephus, who was born 37 years after the alleged death of Jesus, but who is, for some reason, considered a contemporary source on him by apologists quite often. It's important to note that much of the biblical letters from Paul hadn't even been drafted until close to 20 years after Josephus' birth, and that he was born into a religious family in Judea, where the alleged crucifixion takes place, and although apologists would like to consider him a historian, he outlined Jewish history beginning with biblical creation according to Jewish tradition. Lee Strobel continues to explain that there's really amazing evidence for the crucifixion of Jesus, which I can only assume he is attributing to a historian called Tacitus, who again was born much later than Jesus' alleged death, this time in 56 CE. Many apologists like to consider his writings as more credible since they were one of the few mentions of Jesus outside of biblical works at the time, but listen to it in context. This is Tacitus discussing Nero blaming the Christians for a fire he probably set in order to build his super rad house that ended up destroying much of Rome in 64 CE. Now, he's going to, in passing, mention Christus, who is Jesus, while discussing this, because Nero blamed the population of Christians within the city for the fire. Quote, Nero fastened the guilt, ellipses, on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, for whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pontius Pilate, and most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome. Basically, he's just saying, this is why they call them Christians, because they believed in a guy named Christus that was killed by Pilate. It doesn't give you proof. He's saying that that's what the Christians called him. It's not proof, bro. Strobel closes his argument by stating that Bart Ehrman, an atheist, biblical/religious scholar, says Jesus existed whether we like it or not, which is true. Ehrman does consider Jesus to be a historical person. However, he also considers much of the biblical account of him to be a myth and argues that memories of Jesus became fanciful myth over years and years of the telephone game and fell victim to both a religious movement and the natural increased probability of inaccuracy due to oral retelling of the same story over and over.
So what you're saying is, this guy sucks.
This guy sucks.
David A.R. White goes to take his letter explaining why he won't give up his subpoenaed sermons to the nondescript government office. And, of course, the guy's an asshole. This entire setup is so divorced from reality, I don't even know how to comment on it. Also, when he leaves, he has some sort of sharp pain. Oh boy, are they gonna kill the "Hey Scotty, Jesus man" meme because it needs to die? Later in court, he passes out and is taken out on a stretcher. But oh no, he was the only outwardly Christian juror. What will they do now? Point of advice, if you needed one pretty biased juror to win the case, you didn't really have a case.
And when David A.R. White's character collapses in pain, Satan here turns to his trusty sidekick and says,
I guess that proves there is no God, because they just lost the only juror they could count on.
Because Satan is an asshole, but also, he hated God's Not Dead One, and he is here to avenge Sorbo. So now they call to the stand some guy who wrote a book about a homicide detective exploring the gospel as if it were a case today. If I'd have known this was a circle jerk, I'd have brought enough lube for the whole class. So the guy goes on to say that they often solve cold cases by reviewing witness statements, sometimes long after they've been deceased, but the guy must realize that none of the gospel stories are first-hand accounts, and the one written closest to his death was Mark, which was 70 years after his death, at best, meaning they were never witnesses. It's like you guys never read the damn book. Why am I yelling so much today? I just need some time alone with this copy of Glamaholic, where Jesse is sweaty, smoking a cigarette, wearing a tank top, and glaring at me with some come-hither eyes. And of course, Satan is bamboozled by all of this. Our heroes rejoice with a surprising lack of sexual tension. How could you possibly be in the same room as Jesse Metcalf and not rip your clothes off and assume whatever position he demanded?
After that testimony, Brooke forces her way into the court, and Ernie Hudson decides to turn his acting on for a second.
Brooke, order! I'll have order!
Brooke argues she should be able to be a witness, though the evil lawyer atheist bastard man says legally she cannot without the parents' consent due to her age. The Honorable Ernie Hudson, however, allows it. I did look this up, by the way, and yeah, a minor can totally testify without a parent's consent, so that was a bunch of cooked-up drama for nothing. Brooke takes the stand, and the defense establishes she asked the question about Jesus first. Alright, so far so good, but next, the prosecution of likely devil-worshipping baby rapists dares to ask if Melissa had shared her faith with Brooke any other time. She did. Brooke explains how her brother had died, and she went to get advice after school. The prosecution asks,
Did Ms. Wesley refer you to any kind of psychological counseling?
No.
Yeah, he makes a pretty good point. Regardless of whether or not you're on school grounds, as a teacher you have certain responsibilities and a place of authority that you could argue she abused a little bit, albeit unintentionally. With further prodding, they get Brooke to admit she is now Christian, and it's because of her teacher. Yeah, I don't really have a moral problem with this, but legally Melissa Joan Hart pretty effed in the A.
After the court is adjourned and MJH gets a good cry in, she sits down to have some cake with Pat Boone. Because Pat Boone wants cake for dinner. So Pat Boone gets cake for dinner. Next time, wear something more modest, by the way. You look like a whore. Maybe a pantsuit. Pat Boone likes himself a little Hillary role play. Now unzip my pants while you tell me that you deleted the emails.
And once again, proving that the movie doesn't even understand its own narrative, students from the school show up and sing a hymnal at Melissa's door. Okay, movie, we get it. Of course there are Christian students who support her. That's not the point. The point is that you legally don't get to proselytize to students because not everyone shares your beliefs. No one cares whether she's Christian or not. They care whether or not she preached her religion to kids. And you know what? Even based upon what the movie shows, I could see coming out of this on either side. But you're completely confusing the message and making it out that she's being targeted for her personal beliefs. She is not. Period. She is in trial for potentially breaking state, local, possibly federal rules on conduct as a public servant. I don't care how many rejected Disney Channel original series stars stand on her lawn with candles, she still potentially did something wrong.
Basically, this is a gesture of solidarity, but through song, because the casting director wanted to fuck this bitch. And he got to, because he gave her the first chance to sing. Meanwhile, Pat motherfucking Boone refuses to be sung to, and as such, joined in, because you either sing with Pat Boone or not at all. So saith Pat Boone.
By the way, Pat Boone hugs Melissa Joan Hart like if the cameras weren't on, he'd strangle her to death and dump her body into the river.
Oh god, a Mike Huckabee appearance. I sure hope he talks about how gays are bad or something.
We check in on the biracial pastoral bromance in the hospital as David A.R. White is recovering from his appendectomy. The Chinese exchange student comes in and says he's going back to China to become a pastor. Okay, good luck, man. I bet you still show up in God's Not Dead 3, but whatevs. Back at the courthouse, the pro-Christian protesters are all sitting silently with all the evil secularists shouting in their face because this is Pureflix, damn it, and our budget isn't big enough for nuance.
In a stroke of lawyery genius, the reason for nocturnal emissions embodied in a single classy gray suit calls MJH to the stand and starts berating her. Basically, his strategy here is to scare the jury into acquittal via reverse psychology / slippery slope arguments. It is worth noting that Jesse shaved his face so that he has a soul patch now.
He basically is saying that if we disallow teachers from teaching their religion, it will end with, and I'm not kidding, the murder of all religious people.
And if they resist, well, let's not kid ourselves. Enforcement is always at the end of a gun.
And then he says this.
If we're going to insist that a Christian's right to believe is subordinate to all other rights, then it's not a right.
No. Absolutely no. No, no. No, no, no. Your right to believe in Christianity is not subordinate to other people's rights, it is equal to them, and that is exactly why you can't teach your personal beliefs in public schools. Your right to swing your fists ends at someone else's face, and when you have a captive audience of young people whom you are an authority figure over, you simply cannot try and teach your personal subjective religious opinion. You are an adult. You are an educator and a public servant with responsibilities, and if you wish to use your position to put your personal beliefs above those of others, you're a fucking asshole. I don't care if it's a Christian teaching scripture, a Muslim teaching the Quran, or even an atheist forcing their lack of beliefs on others. Speaking of which, did you notice something familiar about this movie? Oh yeah, it's the reverse of the first film. In God's Not Dead 1, Kevin Sorbo was the evil atheist professor for demonstrating his religious beliefs in the classroom, but in this movie, when it's the opposite, in a much more strict setting, a high school instead of a college, we're all supposed to support the teacher for being brave and honest in their beliefs. The people who made this movie don't just want their right to believe to be equal with the rights of others, they want it to supersede the rights of others who believe differently than them, and for that, they can go fuck themselves. Amy calls up the newsboys during the deliberation, by the way, because I guess she doesn't have any non-cameo-oriented friends, and they convince the audience to pray for Grace.
You know, it's not a God's Not Dead movie without a Christian boy band to signal our climax. Much how tantric sex with Pat Boone ends.
So the deliberation comes in, and of course they find her innocent. It's too bad Wade didn't know the newsboys or conservative Christians would have one less thing to complain about. I'm sort of at a loss on this one. Usually movies like this will at least try to make it seem like the protagonist gave good arguments, but in the tradition of the first film, they didn't even bother and declared her the winner anyway. It's like watching a sports movie with underdogs where the bad guy team won, but at the last second they all die in a freak lightning strike. You need to earn a win in a movie or it doesn't mean anything. And honestly, are you telling me this isn't going to get appealed? Really?
And here you can see Melissa Joan Hart and Sexual Thunderclap's first on-screen hug. Look at her face. That's the face of sudden and uncontrollable pelvic contractions caused by orgasm. Drink it in, MJH. Drink it in.
Of course, it cuts to the newsboy singing another shitty song about how it's considered wrong now to share your belief, which is ironic considering it's their whole fucking job.
For some reason, Brooke walks out of the courthouse and down to the protesters to exclaim, "God's not dead!" Nobody besides her has any sort of context as to why this statement is relevant, but they cheer nonetheless. It's wild that God's Not Dead could somehow be more competently written than its sequel. It's almost like they stole the first movie from someone else or something. Nah. In another scene, Pat Boone finally relents on the sexiness for just a moment to give props to the man upstairs.
Live outside the courthouse here in Hope Springs.
You did it! God is good!
An actor of the ages, ladies and gentlemen.
Final shot of evil baby rape lawyer Satan Team Force has them explaining they won't appeal because they're afraid it would set precedent. I'm going to disagree on that one. There were a lot of procedural missteps in this case that only Judge Ernie Hudson would allow. Take this to a higher court? Can't imagine they'd lose. Anyway, one of the lawyers says this.
Not to mention you proved the existence of Jesus Christ.
Oh no. Of course it ends on the titular song and Melissa Joan Hart enjoying the last time she'll ever be seen in a theatrically released movie. You'd think that's the end of the movie. However, no, there is an after the credits scene, which Jake didn't see, and I told him not to watch it once I found out he didn't. So here's what happens, Jake. There's an after the credits scene that does set up God's Not Dead 3. The biracial pastoral bromance returns to the church after David is released from the hospital. The cops are waiting there for them, though, and arrest David for failing to produce the sermons he was subpoenaed for. So, oh goody, they're setting up another shitty courtroom drama for God's Not Dead 3.
Oh, motherfucker. I was wondering where that scene was, and I thought maybe they just cut it.
Nope. That's gonna... Which almost pisses me off, because let me be honest here. Opinion on this movie. It's not good, and I don't mean in the way God's Not Dead was not good, because I will watch God's Not Dead. If I saw that for $10 on Blu-ray at Walmart, I'd fucking pick that shit up, because sometimes it's hilarious to watch. It's so bad, it's good. It's that kind of movie.
Especially Sorbo and Dean Cain. Like, there's a lot to love.
Yeah, this movie has none of the charm of the badness. It's just bad and boring. And like I said earlier, Melissa Joan Hart, no offense, I like Sabrina the Teenage Witch in kind of a campy, silly way. She's terrible in this. There's like a scene where she's supposed to cry, and I don't believe it at all. There's like, she's bad. She has no charisma. Jesse Metcalfe is boring as fuck as well. We made sexy jokes. Yep, he's attractive. He's John Tucker. He's attractive. That's it. He has no personality. He has less of a personality than Josh from God's Not Dead 1. Think about that.
Yeah.
This is what Josh looks like. Does that look like a person with any personality traits? No. So I don't even know what to say. I can't... It's objectively a worse movie in the sense that I want to watch it less. It's not a good movie.
Yeah.
It is bad. Do not watch this movie. Even as, like, the first one, go rewatch the first one. Have fun with your friends making fun of it. This one, avoid. It's shit. And the worst part is, they're making God's Not Dead 3. This one was made for $5 million and made $20 million. It made 4 times its budget. You think they're not going to make that shit? And David A.R. White's going to be the main character, and probably Josh is going to team up with Melissa Joan Hart and get a super legal team? It's going to be bullshit. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend this. It was bad in every way. I played it at 1.5 times speed on my computer as soon as it got to like the 45-minute mark. Like it just you don't lose anything out of it. You don't need the tonality of their voice to tell you anything. Like in a movie with serious acting, you wouldn't want to do that because the delivery and the beats of dialogue are important to a performance. This is just like drivel. It's so bad, and there's nobody you even look forward to seeing. Like last time, we were at least cheering for the auto guy, or we just wanted to see what Kevin Sorbo was going to be a cunt about again. But nothing in this, nothing, not one thing. So yeah, don't watch this. Watch just the review, and then never see it again. So yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. Honestly, if you watch this review all the way through, holy fuck, congratulations. I don't have a prize for you. So, Sorry. If you want, you can always tell us what movies you want us to do. in the comments section of this video, or you can check out our review of God's Not Dead 1. It's not that great, but it's our first movie review, so still better than God's Not Dead 2, the movie.
Anyways, you guys, thanks for watching.
Yeah.
And let me know who was sexier, Pat Boone or Jesse Metcalf.
You can always follow us on Twitter at Bible Reloaded.
You can follow Hugo at Hugo Reloaded, and you can also subscribe to the channel and hope for more Pat Boone-related humor.
You can always donate to our Patreon campaign. We do a once-a-month patron-only hangout, and that's a lot of fun. Also, this month we're doing just a general hangout live on YouTube for anyone, and that I think is on the 12th at 5 p.m. Eastern, right?
Correcto. It'll be TBR live at 5, which is catchy and also accurate. It is 5 Eastern.
Yeah.
So for everyone else, just adjust accordingly if you're not in the Eastern time zone. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun. We're going to read a comic book. We're going to hang out. We're going to interact with you guys. So show up. God damn it.
So I guess that's it. It was not worth it. I hope you guys are happy. This was not worth my day. I'm going to be up till goddamn 7 in the morning doing this.
Enjoy.
Ugh. Fuck you guys.